The Victorians had a taste for the bizarre, and they didn't hide it. With photography on the rise and P.T. Barnum turning human spectacle into a full-blown industry, the world got its first curated look at freaks' oddities and the deeply unusual. But it wasn't just about the live shows. Back in their homes, people used magic lanterns and stereoscopes to see these so-called curiosities in 3D. And today, you'll be seeing those people who were once treated as attractions, not humans. So let's begin this countdown with number 15, Lazarus and Joanna's Baptista, Colorado. Long before Chang and Eng, Europe had already seen strange conjoined twins who defied belief. Lazarus and Joann were born in Genoa in the early 1600s, centuries ahead of modern medicine. Lazarus was healthy, intelligent, and completely mobile, while his twin bro, Joann's, hung from his chest and abdomen, alive but mostly immobile, with minimal consciousness. Together, they toured Europe, performing before nobles and scientists, even gaining audiences with King Charles I and Queen Henrietta Maria. Crowds marveled, but offstage Lazarus covered his brother with a cloak to avoid gawkers. He married, fathered children, and managed his career with remarkable dignity. One legend says he once killed a man after being taunted. The court refused to execute him, ruling that it would be unjust to kill Joann's, who was innocent. Freed, he resumed touring, proving that survival itself could be both his curse and his protection. Their story blended anatomy, morality, and luck into something history never forgot. Number 14, Mirren Dejo. Mirren Dejo was born somewhere in the Netherlands and became known across Europe as the Invulnerable Man. For good reasons. As strange as it sounds, his body could be pierced with swords, daggers, spikes, just name it, seemingly without pain or injury. In his early years, Dejo lived a normal life, working in design and reporting nothing unusual. But around his early 30s, he claimed to receive vivid dreams that convinced him he was chosen by a higher force. At age 33, he quit his job and declared himself invulnerable. He started performing in bars and underground venues, letting strangers drive sharp steel objects straight through his torso. He also swallowed glass, razor blades, and other dangerous materials. Despite the crowd's shock, he truly believed his body was divine. Dejo claimed his powers were a gift from God, meant to steer humanity away from materialism. In 1948, he swallowed a steel needle to prove his faith. But sadly, it was surgically removed, and 10 days later, he died from an aortic rupture at age 35. Number 13, Commodore Nut. George Washington Morrison. Nut was a lively English showboy when P.T. Barnum found him in 1862 performing in a shabby country fair. Outraged by his manager's neglect, Barnum claimed he paid the boy's parents $30,000 for a multi-year contract that included both education and care. Under the name Commodore Nut, the child became a sensation across America and Europe, charming royalty and crowds alike. But fame brought rivalry. He and General Tom Thumb, Barnum's other celebrated little performer, both fell for the tiny but glamorous Lavinia Warren. Their competition turned bitter, even erupting into an onstage fight. When Lavinia married Thumb, Nut was heartbroken and swore off romance for years. Still, he stayed with Barnum's company, performing musical and comedy acts that drew steady applause. As he grew older, he withdrew from the limelight but remained a beloved figure among circus folk, a performer remembered less for size than for stubborn heart and spirit. Number 12, Little Angie. You've seen Angelo, even if you don't realize it. He's been in your childhood movies, your cult horror tapes, your Saturday morning shows, always tucked into a corner of the screen, stealing the scene. He was only 2 feet 11, but his film career ran 6 decades deep. While most actors from Freaks disappeared, Rosito did the opposite. He became the face of every role nobody else could quite pull off, Gremlins, ghouls, sidekicks, aliens, circus misfits. He was Little Mo on Beretta. He was Master in Mad Max, Beyond Thunderdome. Between gigs, he ran a humble newsstand in LA because for him, fame was never the point. Work was. From Dracula versus Frankenstein to HR Pufnstuf to the beloved Rogue, he showed up. He didn't need a spotlight or a freak tent. He carved a place in the screen's corners and stayed there longer than anyone expected. That's not luck. That's hustle. Angie never left. He just kept showing up. Number 11. The religiously tattooed woman. Anna Mae Burlingston never planned on being part of a circus. This Spokane-born lady married tattoo artist Charles "Red" Gibbons in 1912, and that union rewrote her destiny. To advertise his work, Red covered more than 80% of her body with religious imagery, like saints, angels, and biblical scenes inspired by Renaissance masters. Under the name Artoria Gibbons, she became the woman covered in holy tattoos. Crowds first stared in disbelief, then in admiration. Her living mural became a bridge between art and faith, beauty and devotion. Over the years, she performed with traveling carnivals, fairs, and the biggest tents of Ringling Brothers and Barnum. Unlike most tattooed acts who disappeared after a decade, Artoria stayed on the road into her 70s, retiring in 1981 after nearly 70 years in show business. She died in 1985, one of the last of her kind. Her story wasn't about ink. It was about belief etched in the skin. Number 10. Norah Hildebrandt. Norah Hildebrandt didn't choose to be America's first tattooed lady, but let's say fate and family did it for her. She was born in 1857 and grew up under the hum of her father's tattoo needles. Martin Hildebrandt was America's earliest tattoo artist, and when work was slow, he used his daughter's skin as his canvas. By her 20s, Norah's body bore over 365 designs, each one hand-inked by her father. When she debuted at Bunnell's Museum in 1882, Victorian audiences were stunned. A woman displaying tattoos once reserved for soldiers and sailors. She later toured with Barnum and Bailey, billed as the nation's first professional tattooed woman. Norah carried herself with confidence and quiet pride, turning what was once considered shameful into showmanship. She died young, in 1893, but left behind a movement that made self-expression part of performance. Norah's courage shaped the stage long after she was gone from this world. Number 9. Grady Styles Jr. Grady Styles Jr. grew up inside the carnival world and never escaped it. Born with ectrodactyly, a rare defect that fused his fingers and toes into claw-like shapes, he became known as Lobster Boy. A wheelchair carried him, but his arms were pure muscle, and he knew how to use them. Off stage, that strength, and the anger behind it, turned ugly. Heavy drinking sharpened his temper until the whole family walked on eggshells. In 1978, when his eldest daughter tried to marry a man he disapproved of, Grady ended it with a gunshot, killing her fiancé the night before the wedding. He confessed, yet a judge spared him prison, claiming no facility could manage his condition. 15 years probation followed. The violence didn't stop. By 1992, his wife, Mary Teresa, had had enough. She hired a 17-year-old sideshow hand to end it. The following year, Grady was shot dead in his own home, killed by his own family. That was it. Number 8. African Dwarf Tommy. Well, you'd think a black man under 3 feet tall in 1840s America wouldn't make it past the street corner, let alone onto national stages. But Thomas Dilward wasn't like normal Vegas dudes. He called himself African Tom Thumb, Japanese Tommy, and African Dwarf Tommy, depending on the crowd. He danced, sang, and told jokes, and he did it in white-dominated minstrel shows, long before most black entertainers got anywhere near the spotlight. While white men wore burnt cork and mocked his race, Dilward stood right next to them, stealing their thunder. He worked with Christie's Minstrels, Bryant's, and Wood's companies, often as the only non-white name on the bill. He didn't just survive it, he flipped it. He's even credited with coining the word hunky-dory. In time, he toured with all-black groups, rising from a token gimmick to a respected showman. He died in 1887, but his influence didn't. He wasn't just a novelty, he was a rule breaker, and history remembers the ones who cracked the mold. Number 7. Princess Raja. Princess Raja built a rare career that started on Coney Island and ended under vaudeville's brightest lights. In the 1890s, as America obsessed over Oriental dance, she emerged as one of its boldest stars, part sideshow attraction, part headliner. She performed at the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair, captured by Edison's film crew in a short reel that still survives. Her signature acts, the Cleopatra dance, snake dance, and Arabian chair dance, where she balanced a chair in her teeth, combined elegance with physical daring. In 1909, theater owner Willie Hammerstein saw her at Huber's Museum and booked her for his Victoria Theater, New York's top vaudeville stage. She toured the Keith and Orpheum circuits, earning up to $1,000 a week, a fortune for her time. Briefly married to producer Clifford Fisher, she divorced by 1921 and kept performing for decades after. While others vanished with the vaudeville era, Raja danced on, turning mystique, motion, and grit into a lifelong spotlight. Number 6. Monster Show Maven. William Cameron Coup wasn't a frontman. He was the engineer behind the curtain. Born in 1836, he worked his way through the American circus world before anyone had figured out how to make it profitable. He started young, running sideshows and learning how to move tents, animals, and men like clockwork. By 1871, he'd partnered with P.T. Barnum to launch what became Barnum's Grand Traveling Museum, Menagerie, Circus, and Hippodrome. Barnum sold the myth. Coup built the machinery. He designed the first circus train, turning a slow wagon business into a cross-country industry, and invented the multi-ring system that could entertain thousands at once. After splitting with Barnum, Coup kept inventing. He opened the United Monster Shows, built one of the first traveling aquariums, and later tried Wild West spectacles. He didn't die rich or famous, but he left behind the blueprint for every circus that followed. He wasn't the showman, they all were, because of him. All right, guys, now let's head over to number 5, The Candy Kids. Jean Bragant's story began in Austria in 1869, where he performed under the name Prince Colibri, charming European audiences with quick wit and timing. Across the ocean, Inez Lewis, a little person from Iowa, was making her own mark as a singer and dancer. When they met, the chemistry was instant. They married around 1905 and built a two-person act that blended humor, music, and movement, performing as the Candy Kids. Their popularity caught the eye of the John G. Woodward Candy Company, which turned them into the cheerful faces of its advertising campaign. Posters, product tins, and live appearances made them miniature celebrities. Away from the stage, they built a perfectly scaled home in Council Bluffs, Iowa, designed to fit their proportions exactly, a landmark still standing today. Jean died in 1944. Inez carried their legacy for another 20 years. They weren't freaks, they were entertainers who turned partnership into permanence, a sweet reminder that showmanship could be both joyful and dignified. Number 4, Colonel Speck. Fleming W. Ackerman didn't need height to command a room. Born in 1863 in Moravia, he grew to 4 feet 4 inches, but that was the least interesting thing about him. From childhood, he was drawn to music, performing locally before joining the Tremaine Brothers troupe in 1875. Barnum himself tried to recruit him when he was 13, but Ackerman's family said no. He studied music in New York, met Tom Thumb and Lavinia Warren, and joined their Lilliputian opera company, touring across North America. When a crooked manager ran off with the troupe's money, he kept working until his voice gave out. Then he shifted gears entirely, running a photography studio, a telephone exchange, a bus line, and leading Huff's cornet band as drum major. Locals later called him Colonel Speck. By the time he died in 1946, he'd done everything he wanted, proving a short man could still live a tall life. Number 3. Major Edward Newell. Edward Newell never had the height of a leader, but he carried himself like one. Barely 3 feet tall, he became one of Barnum's best-known performers, often billed as Major Edward Newell or General Grant Jr. His fame wasn't only his size, it was his composure. In 1877, his marriage to Minnie Warren, sister of Lavinia Warren, Tom Thumb's wife, became a national headline, complete with lavish ceremonies and press coverage. But tragedy came quickly. Minnie died a year later during childbirth. Newell disappeared from American show bills and resurfaced in London, rebuilding his life quietly. There, he met Mary Ann Drake, a woman of average height, and found a new audience in variety halls. Unlike many of Barnum's acts, he aged with dignity, not scandal. He worked steadily until his death in 1919. To his peers, he wasn't a novelty. He was a professional, one of the few who turned showmanship into a lasting, graceful art. Number 2. Princess Nelly and Major Stanley Jober. Stanley Jober knew his size could draw eyes, but he made sure people stayed for the show. Standing somewhere between 3 and 4 feet, he worked every small-town fair and tent circuit in America. His partner, Nelly Frances Way, barely 30 inches tall, was a violinist with a gentle presence and a sharp wit. Together, they became Princess Nelly and Major Stanley, a duo that blended music, banter, and humor into something tender and genuine. They toured with the Otis Smith Circus and the mighty Doris Colonel Francis Ferrari show, living out of a tiny truck that served as both home and stage. When the Depression dimmed the circus lights, they settled in Waterford, Connecticut, in a 10 by 30-foot house they built for themselves. Nelly passed in 1941. Stanley followed years later. Their names faded, but their life together stayed remarkable. A partnership built not on applause, but on endurance, craft, and a deep trust. Number 1. Commandante of the Carnival. William Morgan's story doesn't sound real, but it is. He wasn't raised to be a revolutionary. He ran away from Ohio as a teenager to join the circus, sword-swallowing, elephant-wrangling, sideshow stuff. But after a prison stint and a few dark turns, he vanished, then resurfaced in the Cuban mountains with a rifle and a new identity. El Americano, they called him. In the late 1950s, he fought alongside Fidel Castro, leading rebel troops and becoming a national symbol. Cameras followed him, posters were made, and when Castro's promises soured, Morgan flipped sides. That move got him executed by firing squad in 1961, just weeks before the Bay of Pigs. He was only 32. No medals, no second chance. From carnival to combat, his life skipped logic. Even now, nobody's quite sure if he was a hero, a drifter, or just a man who refused to sit still. But he's remembered. And not many sideshow kids get that kind of ending. If you've enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon.